It was a few days before Christmas, and school had let out for winter break. I'd be spending the holiday with my mom and stepdad. I was really looking forward to spending a Christmas with my mom and stepdad. He's such a great guy, and we get along really well. My stepmom was helping my parents unload my bags from the car when I noticed the blinds from the neighbor's house cracked, like someone was looking through them. My mom's neighbor walked out to see what the commotion was about. And she told them I'd be spending the holidays with them. The neighbor called over his wife from the garage, and my mom introduced me to their neighbors. They were really nice people. Our neighbor then called over another person. A guy, roughly in his late teens, walked over to us. This guy was tall, extremely thin, had hair that was dyed jet black down to his shoulders, and had a full tattoo sleeve running down his left arm. I remember thinking how jealous I was that he had a full sleeve and I couldn't get a single tattoo. This guy looked out of it, didn't make eye contact or anything. He just looked down at the grass. I assumed this was their son, but it was actually their nephew. Our neighbors introduced us to this guy, who we will call Kyle. I shook Kyle's hand, and the entire time he didn't make eye contact with me or say nice to meet you. Right then, I knew this guy was a creep. My mom suggested that they come over for a barbecue sometime, and our neighbors agreed. I asked my mom if she knew anything about Kyle, and she mentioned that our neighbor's wife had told her that he had been in quite a bit of trouble and needed somewhere to stay. The neighbor refused to tell my mom what kind of trouble he got into. Over the course of my stay, I would hear yelling and arguing coming from our neighbor's home. It was Kyle. He would be starting all the fights. He would be yelling at his aunt and uncle, and they would speak quietly to him in return. I assumed to try to get him to calm down. It was official. Kyle had issues. It was Christmas Eve night, and my family had my grandparents over, followed by my aunt Kathy, her husband Mo, and their two kids. We enjoyed an early Christmas dinner since my aunt Kathy would be spending Christmas Day with her in-laws. After enjoying a large meal, I was exhausted, and I made my way to my room to play some video games before heading to sleep. I was half dozing off in my chair when I heard my window being fiddled with. I got spooked, and I grabbed the closest thing I could use as a weapon. My only option was a trophy I had gotten when I played Little League. With caution, I pulled back the curtains, and I could see the silhouette of a person running through the backyard. I ran to my parents' room and woke them up. I told them someone had tried to break into my room. My stepdad grabbed a baseball bat and marched into the backyard. He came back a few minutes later and told me he didn't find anyone outside. He did mention he saw footprints in the mud, proving someone did try to break into my room. I had a feeling it was Kyle. My stepdad told me to lock my window and go back to my video games or try to sleep. I told you he was a great guy, super chill. I ended up falling asleep, but a few hours later, I was abruptly awoken by a woman's scream. I jumped out of bed, dreading it was coming from my own home. But again, I heard the scream, followed with pleads of agony. I kept hearing, "Why?" and "Please put it down." I ran to my parents' room, but they were already standing in the hallway. I asked them what was going on, and my mom mentioned they heard screaming coming from our neighbor's house. My stepdad decided he would walk over to their home to make sure everything was okay. He came back a few minutes later and told my mom to call the police. My stepdad was visibly shaken. In about 10 minutes, our neighbor's house was swarmed with police cars and medical personnel. My parents walked out to gossip with the other neighbors. When I asked if I could go as well, they told me to stay inside. When I found out what happened that night, the night I heard the scream, I had never been more disturbed in my life. My neighbor and his wife had confronted their nephew about stepping up and doing more around the house and contributing to the bills. Kyle was a lazy person, from my understanding, and instead of getting a job, he decided to do the unforgivable. That night, our neighbor's wife had stepped out to do some last-minute shopping or something, and our neighbor and his nephew were home watching TV. An argument between them had transpired over bills, and Kyle couldn't take the fact that he would have to get a real job. Kyle stabbed his uncle 30 times with a kitchen knife and decapitated him. He went on to place his uncle's head in a gift box, and when his aunt came home, Kyle told her he had a special present for her. To her dismay, she opened the box to find her decapitated husband's head. He approached her with an axe, and she pleaded with him to let her live. This explains the yelling and pleading I heard that night. He must have felt remorse because he let her live, but he couldn't do the same for his uncle. I believe Kyle tried to break into my room that night to do who knows what to me and my family. He's clearly demented and bloodthirsty. I don't know what came of this monster, nor do I wish to know. I'm sure he's rotting in some prison somewhere. Merry Christmas. I will tell you all the story about how I almost got abducted by Santa Claus. My parents and their friends threw a Christmas party every year and would go all out. They would decorate the venue all festive, and we would all get to open an early Christmas present. The adults would also hire a Santa to come in and take pictures with us. I was playing with some of the other kids when my dad and one of his friends walked in with this Santa look-alike. I must admit, he looked official. Big beard, red suit, and a fat gut. This man played the role well. He walked in, let out a big ho ho ho. The adults began to applaud, and the kids cheered in excitement. As he was standing in front of his audience, he looked over at me and made direct eye contact. He winked at me and waited for me to walk over to him. I did. I'm a 9-year-old girl, and I was excited to get my early Christmas gift. He grabbed my hand and pulled me close to him. I remember thinking how tight his grip was around my hand. I pulled away because it began to hurt too much. The fake Santa bent down and asked me if I had been a naughty girl this year. I shook my head no, and he responded, "I doubt that." As young as I was, I knew this wasn't right. It made me feel extremely uncomfortable. I decided to not let it interfere with the rest of the day, and I went on playing with my friends. It was time to take pictures, and I told my mom I didn't want pictures with Santa this year. She told me to stop being silly and nudged me over to him. As I walked towards him, I could see his smile growing wider, like exaggeratedly wider. His gaze was haunting. He had the eyes of a hungry predator. I stopped just a few feet in front of him, not wanting to take another step closer. I looked back at my mom, and she made a nudging gesture at me. I shook my head no, and she gave me that angry look parents give you when you're about to get in trouble for something. As uncomfortable as I was, I approached him. "Hi there, little lady," he whispered to me as I sat on his lap. "What can I get you for Christmas this year?" he asked me in this disgusting tone. Nervously, I replied, "Barbies." He told me, "I have a brand new Barbie in my sleigh, if you'd like to walk out there with me." I shook my head no, and jumped off his lap. I ran over to my mom, and she assumed I was being a brat and didn't want my picture taken. It was halfway through the night, and we get a knock on the door. It was the pizza guy. My parents had ordered pizza for everyone. All the guests began to approach the table with the pizzas on them. I was playing with my friend in an area that was tucked behind a large wall. It was where they would place the tables after they'd been used. We were pretty well hidden from everyone else. My friend's mom called her over to get some food, and she stood up and left. I was alone, but I was okay playing Barbies by myself until she came back. Suddenly, I heard a psst, psst. I turned around and saw the fake Santa. He bent down staring at me. He gave me a smile and one of those creepy finger waves. He asked me if I still wanted the Barbie, and I told him no. He kept insisting I walk out with him to check out his sleigh and reindeer. I yelled out no again, and just then, he charged at me like a lion, hungry eyes and all. He grabbed me and placed a napkin over my mouth. My screams were muffled, and my eyesight became blurry. I was awoken by constant bouncing. I looked up and saw the fake Santa. The bouncing came from him carrying me and walking fast. I was still out of it, and then a few seconds later, I was fine. He looked at me and told me not to scream or make a scene or he would kill me. As he was about to open the door to his truck, I heard the familiar voice of my mom yelling at him to put me down. He completely dropped me waist high to the ground and kicked me away from his truck. He slammed the door hard and sped off. My mom ran over to me crying and asking me if I was okay. Everyone then spilled into the parking lot and it became a huge frenzy. Everyone, especially my dad, was freaking out. Unfortunately, this man was never caught. My dad hired a random guy from Craigslist to play Santa at this event. Not his best move. He figured, why spend extra money on a new Santa suit or pay more for a Santa Claus impersonator through an agency? I'm 17 years old now and I hate Christmas, especially anyone dressed in a Santa costume. This year for Christmas, my wife and I decided to get away instead of doing something with our families. We get along with our families and all, but we work very demanding jobs and don't get much time alone together. We rented out an Airbnb in Colorado and would make the 7-hour drive out tomorrow, Christmas Eve. We arrived at our Airbnb and it was perfect. It was snowing out and we couldn't wait to cuddle up on the couch and watch a movie. After dinner, we sat on the couch and began to watch another movie when suddenly we get a knock on the door. My wife and I look at each other shocked. We're not expecting anyone or anything. "Hello, who's there?" I said, approaching the door. We're met by a second set of knocks, and I about jumped out of my skin. I looked through the peephole and didn't see anyone. I opened the door and was met by a huge blizzard. It's snowing extremely hard out, and there's no reason for anyone to be out right now, especially in these conditions. We chalk it up to kids playing a prank on us. We decide to ignore it and continue to watch our movie. That night, my wife and I are laying in bed talking. It's freezing out. I was mid-sentence when my wife asked me if I heard a noise. I asked her what she meant, and she said she could hear a crunching noise, fresh snow being crushed by footsteps. I tell my wife it's probably those kids again, and they'll go away if we don't buy into their prank. "How are you sure they were kids?" my wife asked me. I told her it was speculation, because who else would be out knocking on someone's door this late? The crunching footsteps kept getting closer and closer to our bedroom window. I get out of bed and step quietly towards the window. I grab the bottle off of the bedside table to use as a weapon. I creep quietly towards the window and rip open the curtains. It revealed the horrifying faces of 2 men peering into our room. These creeps were looking into our room, spying on my wife and I. I yelled at them to go away, but they didn't move a muscle. They kept staring at us, primarily my wife. I was stuck. I kept trying to yell at them to go away, sounding as intimidating as I could, but I kept stuttering. I was afraid for our safety. One of the men kept eyeing my wife, undressing her with his eyes. This sick son of a even had the audacity to lick his lips as he stared at her. I told my wife I would run out there and scare these men away, but she advised me against it. I grabbed my cell phone, and to our horror, no reception. I tried the landline. I got nothing. The cord had been cut. They were trying to intimidate us however they could. They pounded on the walls and windows, called for me to come outside to teach them a lesson as they laughed. I was afraid they would break in. I loved myself for remembering to lock up the doors and windows. The men must have gotten tired of harassing us because everything went silent. Their voices became muffled, and the crunching footsteps in the snow got further and further away. I decided I'd stay awake that night in case they came back. The following morning, luckily nothing else happened. We cut our getaway short and packed up all of our belongings and got out of there. Before we left, I walked around the Airbnb and inspected it for any damages. These idiots had broken the planks to one of the fences and also shattered all of the windows from the garage. What disturbs me the most is what I found by our bedroom window. They must have set it down and forgotten all about it. They left behind zip ties, duct tape, and a small bottle of some type of liquid. What did these men plan to do to us? I doubt they knew who we were. More than likely, they were choosing anyone at random who happened to be home. We made it back in time to enjoy the rest of the holiday with my in-laws. We told everyone what happened the night before in full detail. Everyone was mortified. Happy holidays, everyone.